I very frequently remind myself to like really like the only thing that will matter is like, did I live fully? It doesn't really matter like how much we work or what is the profession or what is the exact task you're doing on, but what truly matters is
even if you think you could be doing this for the rest of your life, this might not be true.
I love that so much because I think that's the key to how we do life is like, are you holding on to the resistance, trying to control everything and getting upset all the time because you can't control like 95% of what's, happening? Like the realization what I got after I like got the burnout and the injury was that.
Well, Tui, thanks for being here. The opening question that I have for you actually comes from your partner, your fiance. I think you're also getting married. You're actually one of the first closer friends who get married, I think. So congratulations on this. He told me, hey Axel, talk with Tui about more than just fitness and nutrition, because she has so much more to offer and has such a deep interest in also mental health, mindset. And I could really relate because I spoke about nutrition, fitness for, 7,000 times, had like, honestly, 50 full day of eatings. And, you develop, but people still sometimes expect that from me, and my opening question combined with Ricky's would be, how do you navigate this kind of expectation from people from your community on social media to create fitness related content? It's working, but at the same time, how do you deal with, hey, this is what I want to post versus this is what people expect me to post? Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
I think it's quite tricky.
Yeah, I love that question because that's been like a very big kind of challenge for me that I've been navigating for the past a year, 2 years or so. And how I navigate it is just starting to go more from like what do people want to see and what they expect into what I want to share, So it was quite difficult at the start, going from like posting all the time all this like badass fitness content and getting like so much like attention and validation and likes and comments, and like my like Instagram was going crazy all the time, into like it getting quite quiet, because people like, okay, what is she doing now? What is she talking about? And then there was like all the kind of fears coming up of like, what if people don't like me? What if they unfollow me now? And what if I'm gonna lose some friends even if they like, I'm not anywhere in that like training hard all the time. So that was definitely like a big kind of identity crisis, that I had there, going from like, who am I? Now when I had this big branding with all the like fitness, vegan, everything, and going into kind of like deciding to walk away from that was like, there was like an empty time of like something sort of dying into like rebirthing something new. And it definitely wasn't easy, but it's been very fulfilling, especially because in the past or in the last months or so, when I was still kind of pushing that content out and that message that didn't anymore like spark my soul on fire, but it was just like, this is what is expected from me, and I should be doing this, I should be posting this is what people want, this is what they like, this is how I'm being seen, into just like accepting like, okay, that was the past chapter, and now it's time to move on. And I think that's one of those things that it's evolving to better, but it's oftentimes people have this idea that this is who I am, and now I just have to be this. Like, we tend to put ourselves into these boxes and have all these labels. And if we think of like the past generations, they studied this one thing and then they're expected to work their whole life, in this like same career. So we are like lucky that we're kind of like more free to move in that. But I think still there is this idea that, you just kind of have to put yourself in that one thing and then just be that. So I also saw that's kind of like my opportunity to inspire others that change is okay. You know, go from it's okay that you evolve. And I think when we have like a dream, I had for so many years, you know, this dream to be this like full-time, like really well-known fitness coach and CrossFit athlete and live somewhere in like a paradise and just do what I want and you know, and achieve that. And after doing that for a couple of years, like living that dream and being like the happiest I was ever been, into realizing like that this is not fulfilling me anymore. Like that was like, it was really hard because there was like this moment of like, okay, like, is this it? Like, is this it? You know, like do I have to continue like feeling empty? So I was trying to hold on to that for a very long time. I was trying to hold on to that identity of I'm this badass CrossFit athlete, this fitness coach. I'm like this. I look like this. I need to look like this. I had a lot of like, you know, body image issues coming up because I was always like this big, muscular, strong woman. Into like starting to lose that a little bit or like change. Not I don't even see it as losing it anymore. It was like my body started to change and people commenting on that, like, oh, how come you're not so muscular anymore? Like you look skinnier, you look smaller. And that was like, I was like the worst kind of. I know people don't mean it that way, you know, but for me it was like you're like offending me here. And when I was trying to hold on to that old. The universe didn't let me, you know. Eventually, I ran myself into burnout. I got a very painful, chronic lower back hip injury, and that was literally like I just had to stop doing, like forcing something that wasn't meant to be for my soul anymore. And that's when, what I mentioned, I went through that, like dying and rebirth into like really discovering like what wants to come now and what's that direction. And it's been a very deep journey, a very deep rebirth into like understanding why it happened, because at the start it was this fight of like, no, I just built this massive empire, you know, like my business was crushing it, I had like more clients that I could take on, everything was going well, and then that just bang. But that's how I kind of like had to stop forcing something that wasn't anymore right for me.
Was that the first time in your life that you had this kind of rebirth?
Definitely not. Like, I guess we all go through those more or less, but that was definitely the hardest and deepest and strongest, and also obviously the most present. But I guess because there, I think still, even that it's just social media, but I think that brings a lot of pressure on it. Like if I think past when I was like a teenager or something, you would have your, you know, friends and your family, and you would maybe worry like, oh, what they're going to think if I do this. But now you've like, you know, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people who are exposed to when you put yourself out there. So there is like, at least for me, there is like much more of this like kind of pressure of that, you know. So in that way, I was feeling like my community was kind of like following like, okay, what is she doing? Why is she not showing up like she was before? So there was like this kind of like rebirth within, like all these eyes watching me in that. Yeah.
I can definitely relate. I just hearing you talk reminded me that I had this rebirth already multiple times. I think for the first time when I finished my degree, I worked in the bank finance industry, and I also think it's actually a good thing. It's actually a good thing and a sign of growth. I just think I can totally relate. It can be super, super challenging, especially if other people expect something from you. And I have a lot of friends who are entrepreneurs, business owners, who have personal brands. And whenever you change, obviously, there will be people who say, hi, I'm not relating to this anymore. I followed you, Tui, because of fitness content, and now you make content about this. This is not resonating with me. So the new kind of Tui will probably resonate with less people, or maybe in the future more. But you know what? You have to let go of something in order to let more in. And that can be a scary place. Still, until today, I have to be honest, it's sometimes scary because I also have like so many different passions. And I know like, it would be probably more successful if I would just do one thing. but then I would be just unhappy. And once you've reached like some of your goals, you understand like, okay, once you've reached it, you're like, okay, that's it. It wasn't about it. It was about the person you became. So I'm really grateful that you brought this up, because I learned something about myself. Like, hey, actually, this is a good thing, and just jump, do it. But maybe for the people who don't know, you give us a bit more context about your journey. The first time I saw you was hosting a CrossFit class, but maybe before that, how did you end up becoming, a CrossFit teacher in Bali? I think many people would say like, oh, this is my dream. This would be my dream, to work in paradise. And I mean, at this time, I think CrossFit was like your main thing, like your passion, right? So you basically lived your dream.
Yes.
How did you get there?
Right. Yeah, I lived my dream, and that's why it was so scary to let go of it, right? So I studied a university degree in sports in Finland, where I'm from, and my dream was, when I was like studying, my dream was to become like a top sport coach. And I went to do that in the Netherlands for a while, but then I realized this is actually not exactly what I want to do, like look at blood samples and be like in that high end. So then it started to evolve more into like, actually I want to work with not like top athletes, but with like kind of normal people. And I was coaching for Finland for a couple of years. I was doing a lot of PTs. That's where I also was introduced to CrossFit. I was like doing bodybuilding at the time, and then once a friend of mine was like, why don't you just like try out this CrossFit thing? And I was like, cross what? Like what? And then I jumped on, and I thought I was like fit and strong, but I was like destroyed. But that sparked something, there was again that kind of one of the rebirths, It was like I was already this like strong muscular person, but then I saw people, climb the ropes and do the handstands and lift Olympic weightlifting. It looks like something I hadn't been doing. So then I got into CrossFit like full on. It was literally like I did that class, and then within a matter of months I was already coaching, and I was training with the group who was competing. So I got like progress really fast because I had a good base, and I was already coaching in like fitness for quite some time. And then that gave me the gate to leave Finland, because that was always my dream since a little girl. I was like, drawing palm trees and suns, because up north is often quite cold and dark. So I always knew that I'm not going to stay there, even though I love Finland and I'm really grateful that I grew up there. But I always knew, like, I didn't feel my roots there. I had this, like, feel like my wings are waiting, So, yeah, whilst I was, like, finishing up my studies and coaching in the fitness, I was already, like, selling my stuff and planning, like, once I graduate, then I'm going to go. So I graduated. I literally, like, sold all my stuff, ended up my relationship, quit all my jobs, and just took a one-way ticket to Thailand.
Oh, no way.
Yes.
No way.
And and I was like, I didn't really, I didn't know how it's going to all end up, but I just had this trust. This is also what I've been like learning. Part of this journey is being like trusting more that feeling. We can always rationalize and analyze and all these things, but like I just felt so strongly, okay, I need to go. I'm not going to be happy. Everything on paper was perfect already, like how my life was set up in Finland, but I just felt like I need to go. So I went to Thailand. I was coaching CrossFit there for like 6 months. And then I got offered a position here in Bali, head coach position, and I took it and I came. Didn't know anything, didn't know anyone, but the plane landed to Bali and I just felt, you came home. Like I felt so strongly. This is home. Like the feeling that I had for years of like, you don't belong here was gone in like a split second. So I just knew like, I need to be here. And I think you can relate,
No,
Bali
I have goosebumps right now.
Bali being the best place on earth. So yeah, that's how I kind of like, found my way here. And I was coaching CrossFit for a couple of years and training and competing and like living that dream that I had for so long. On the side, I started my own online business and that took off really well. And eventually it was like going so well that I decided to stop coaching on the floor and just focus on building my own brands. Yeah.
Goosebumps for 2 reasons. Number 1, I did the same thing. Like I had a safe job and on paper everything looked good, and I dreamed always of this life, having a safe job that pays you well, drive this really specific sports car. And once I saw this happening in front of me, I was like, wait a minute, I'm not happy. Why not? And then I read this book, and I started exploring what I really want to do with my life. And I said, you know what? Right now I have no idea who I am. I am a creation of my surrounding. Like, they told me, you should be doing this, you should be doing that. But I was like, I don't want to do that. I signed up to someone else's basically vision of who I should be. So I said, like, you know what? Screw it. I'm selling everything. I'm quitting my job, and I bought a one-way ticket to Thailand. That's why I had to.
We had a very similar part there.
Yeah. And the second reason why I had goosebumps is because I arrived in Bali. I didn't know a single thing about Bali. I don't know, a friend of mine. I was traveling, and every backpacker will know the story. You meet someone in the hostel. I don't even know if it was a girl or a boy, but anyways, I met someone. They said, we're going to Bali. I was like, yeah, it's not too far. Let's just go to Bali, whatever. And I arrived. I met my taxi driver, like Uber, Grab driver, whatsoever. And I was like, wow, this energy, this feels so nice. And then I jumped on a bike. I was driving through rice fields. I was like, wow, it's something I can't explain until today. It's like describing how a rose smells. It's just nice. It's just, I don't know. And still until today, it's not even the place where we're sitting right now, Canggu. It's not like the most beautiful place here in Bali, but it is something. Like, there's something.
Right. Yeah, I think that's like part of like what this rebirth of mine led me into, was all these like energetics in general, like how they affect us. And I think that's like one thing about Bali as well. Like, as you said, it's even like in general, like the beaches here are not the world-class best or anything, but there's just this energy that the people, and a lot of people, fall in love with Bali, and they say all the same. It's like just this vibe, this feeling that you get here. And I think it's a lot in this energy of like the locals here, and the energy of the land being just like very inviting and friendly, and somehow like just makes you feel so good, and so somehow at home.
We make advertisement for Bali now. Don't come to Bali.
It's
full. It's packed. Don't come. I don't know how I always end up advertising Bali, but it's packed. So don't come, please not. There are other beautiful places in the world. I would want to know, what were your key lessons leaving Finland and moving away? Like, what did it teach you? Because like for me, there are so many things. One thing that you just mentioned, this belief that it will work out. I'm gonna find a way. I'm gonna figure it out. Like, once you are selling everything you own, I'm curious to hear your perspective. But for me, it was so freeing because I was so happy, and I was like, oh my gosh, I have nothing materialistic. I'm living in a hostel, just exploring beaches and hanging out with good people, and I'm so happy. So it's like, oh, I don't need all of this stuff. That was really freeing. But I'm obviously curious to hear what it was for you.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that. Like, first of all, like the freedom that comes when you let go of the material. And I think that's one thing of like the Western world. We are so attached to the idea that something in the external is going to bring the happiness, like the material, the fancy car, the newest iPhone, the bags, like whatever it is. And then we end up like living life in this rat wheel of constant like, well, it must be the next thing. Like, okay, it's still not there. I still feel this gap here, but it must be the next thing. So we're always like chasing, So that was definitely like a cut for me as well, like into like realizing like happiness doesn't come from that. It like can, of course, that can be nice, and it's nice to have the luxury if you're for that. And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with it, but if it's like we're trying to fill that internal gap from the external, it usually never works. So that was for me as well. Like, I literally now I have accumulated quite some stuff again, but I came here with a little backpack, so I felt like free like a bird, But even bigger lessons, I think, for me. It was always very scary for me to leave. Even when I left Finland, when I left my relationship, when I left my jobs, when I left Thailand to Bali, like every time there was like this big unknown in front of me, I felt shit scared. I was like literally like crying. I don't want to go. Why am I doing this to myself again? You know, in this like crisis of like because in a way you're like letting something go that feels painful,
100%.
right? So kind of like even doing that over and over again, and then, you know, leaving my fitness business, leaving being a CrossFit athlete, like every time you leave something that was precious for you before, it can feel really scary and it can feel like very painful. But then even there, the kind of knowing the trust that will make space for where you're meant to go next and for even more something beautiful. So that's definitely been something that even now when I have life situations that it happens and I'm in that process of the pain and letting go and something sort of like dying, is like reminding myself like it's going to be okay. Like this is creating space for something better, so for something new, you know. And with that as well, I think what we spoke earlier, the realization that there's always more, not from the place of like, oh, I'm never satisfied because there's always more, but from the place of like allowing ourselves to explore, because we so often tend to put ourselves in these boxes that we don't allow. What you said as well, you have so many interests, right? There's so much more that we can try and explore and find out, like, oh, I didn't even know about this thing, or that I like this, or I'm good at this. Like I think we have so many gifts, and maybe we've just discovered like one, and maybe like 2% of that one gift, and then we're just like running life on that. So somehow also like this always like leaving and recreating is like just like trusting myself that there is always, you know, new chapters and new things to come. And it's okay to fail as well. That's been a big lesson. Or I don't even believe in failure. I believe in it's just there's no failure. There's only like learning. But in the moment when it seems like shit,
it's a tough one. Yeah.
Yeah, I failed, or it didn't go as I expected, or it didn't go as I wanted.
Yeah.
But in that moment, I've learned to realize that it wasn't supposed to go the way I wanted. I'm not in control of the external. So I was meant to get that lesson. I was meant to go through that to go where I'm going to go next. Yeah.
It's a hard one. It's easy to say, you know, when we're sitting here right now, but when you experience this moment and there's so much conditioning behind, it feels so scary. When you mess something up and you feel like a failure. But yeah, you're completely right. I think it's especially important for younger people to realize, you know, even if you think you're 18 and you found this one passion, even if you think you could be doing this for the rest of your life, this might not be true. So why would you? I stressed myself so much when I was a young adult, like I have to find this one thing that I'm going to do for the rest of my life. And in Europe, I don't know if it's just Europe, probably it's all over the world, we put so much pressure on young people to like figure things out. And let's be honest, most adults haven't figured it out, you know, and we're still finding ourselves. And then we are, even if you found your thing, you found your dream, but then still you're like, oh, damn it, there's actually more that I need to discover, or I want to discover. And you would just betraying yourself, you would be lying to yourself if you would just stay in that comfortable bubble. So maybe we have to eliminate this idea of like, we have to find this one thing and we have to do it for the rest of our lives.
Absolutely. And I think there's like, at least I used to have all these ideas when I was younger of like, when I'm 25, then I have everything figured out. I have this. When I'm 30, well, then I will have this, and life will look like this, you know, like looking up to kind of like older people think like they have it all figured out. But like the older I get, the wiser I get, and the more also my friends, you know, like in all the different age groups, like no one has it figured out. Everyone is like navigating life, like, you know, with our best of our abilities. But like also I think allowing ourselves to not take it so seriously. I think we make everything so serious and everything needs to, and it's just like, why? Why can't we not just like have more fun and be more playful with that process of like, okay, that wasn't the thing, or it didn't go exactly as I planned, and that's okay. I think like that's something that I've been really cultivating in my like processes now to allow that, because that really brings the courage to take more risks and do more of the unknown, because there's not this like, oh, you better don't do it because you're gonna, if you fail, then I'm gonna like judge myself for it and you know, be that which I used to do a lot, like be so critical of myself and expect other people to also like see me as a failure, but more like kind of own it and be like, well, at least I tried, it wasn't my thing, or whatever it is that it leads to.
And I think really reflective people, they don't give a shit. Really, like if you would tell me like I tried this and I failed, I'm like, oh cool, tell me about it. I'm always excited to hear about other people, you know, messing things up, or like me sharing, you know, I tried this and it didn't work out. There is so much beauty in being vulnerable about it, and I think at the end of the day, who will judge you? Like probably only people who are not so okay with themselves.
Exactly. And it gives permission for others to like fuck up as well, right? Yeah. I think, we just always have this idea that everyone is watching me and what are they thinking about what I'm doing? And, you know, even this idea when people go to the gym, which is understandable the first time, that there's the idea like everyone's going to watch me, like feeling so kind of self-conscious and embarrassed. And we all have it in our own areas. But no one is watching us because everyone is focusing on their freaking selves, like being so, how do I look? You know, how it's like people are gonna look at me. Everyone is just focusing on themselves, you know. Yeah. So I think that's also something like very freeing to just realize, like everyone is so focused on themselves. No one is gonna notice if you like, you know, stumble along the way a little bit. Like it's just inspiring.
1,000,000%. What helps me personally when I catch myself being too serious, and that happens quite frequently. I remind myself that, this might sound weird, but it's the truth, and it might help other people as well. I remind myself that at some point this life is over, and since I came really close to it, I know how irrelevant it will be what other people thought of me, especially people who don't matter. Like I think people at the end, when you're on your deathbed or wherever you're going to be, it's going to be so irrelevant what Alex thought of you in the gym or when you failed or whatever. There are other more important questions that you will ask yourself. And it also takes away this serious attitude, at least for me, because I know it's all going to end at some point. So why am I stressing about this right now? I'm going to regret if I stay in this state.
Absolutely.
And it allows me to, because you see that also with people who get older, all of a sudden they become more vulnerable, best case. And I became, like in those moments, became so vulnerable and said like, this is how I really feel. I don't want to waste my time pretending I'm feeling like this or I'm okay, or this is how I feel right now about you. I wanted to tell everyone, like, I love you, this is how I feel. And I try to reconnect with this feeling in my day-to-day life, because otherwise you just, I don't know, I end up quite frequently taking things too seriously, and I'm like, why am I doing this right now?
Absolutely. I can so relate to that, like kind of reminding ourselves that our time here is limited, because I used to do it a lot myself, that I had this idea that somewhere in the future, like once I just first do this, then somewhere in the future I'm going to allow myself to enjoy more. But now I got to work hard, or like somewhere in the future I'm going to reward myself. But then like kind of realizing that was kind of the trap that we spoke about earlier, right? It's always, the reward is always somewhere in the future. But the only moment we really have is always the now. Even that is really cliche, but like really kind of connecting to the limits of the life, that it will indeed one day end. And I very frequently remind myself to like really like the only thing that will matter is like, did I live fully? No matter how many times I failed or fucked up, whatever it is, like did I fully live? Like did I make the most out of my time here?
It's a really hard question. It also, I completely relate, and I like that question a lot. Like, if I would do the same thing right now for the next 10 years, would I be proud of it at the end? And I often, since I love my work, and I think it's such a tricky thing when you really enjoy your work, but I get frequently to this attitude of like, hey, am I obsessing a bit too much? Am I working a bit too much? And I think you can work a lot, but the attitude, like doing it playfully, you know? And I think that's one of the most difficult skills to master, to not lose perspective about what life is about. Do you have like reminders in your day-to-day life?
Yes, I actually have implemented a very different way of how I approach my work, which was one of the big lessons that I got in my rebirth journey. Was like, it doesn't really matter like how much we work or what is the profession or what is the exact task you're doing on, but what truly matters is the connection to yourself in that. Like, who are you when you are taking that action? Whether it's you're working out or you're working or you are with your friends, like, how are you doing it? Like, what is the intention of it? Is it like, I'm forcing myself, I need to push myself through it. If it's not perfect, I'm gonna judge myself. Or can it come from like, you know, like, I'm still working a lot because I love it, but I prioritize, it's like personally for myself, I prioritize a very different way of doing it. So if I start catching myself, like I'm being too much in my head, I'm worrying too much, I'm stressing, I'm forgetting about, you know, the abundance that is there, I like stop and I reconnect to myself, whether that's with a little meditation, I just get up, whatever it is, some breathing. But that's changed everything for me, because even in my workouts, of course, I don't compete in CrossFit anymore. Maybe you cannot stop in the middle of a competition to connect to yourself. But even in my workouts now, since I just do it for my well-being and fun, I always check in. Am I like forcing myself? Am I holding tension? Am I being like rigid and coming from that place of like, I need to prove something, or I need to do this because I should and I shouldn't this and that? Or am I coming from the place of I'm doing this for me? And I can stay in that sort of like softer energy of like, enjoying what I'm doing, whether I'm doing copywriting, whether I'm working with a client, whether I'm working out at the gym. And that's changed so profoundly how I do life and how I feel about life. And that helps me personally a lot with like staying very aware when I'm, for example, working too much, because I start noticing, oh, I'm not feeling good anymore. I need to shift something. You know, so kind of always bringing back the balance and the harmony in that. Especially, I think for us women, it's like, I know like we are so different to guys, you know.
Yeah, tell me about it. Tell me about it. How is life as a female business owner?
Yeah, it's been also like the realization what I got after I like got the burnout and the injury was that we are not meant to be working out like men. We are not meant to be working like men. And our society in the West is really much built like this one box. It's like very kind of patriarchal, capitalistic, nothing wrong with that, but there's not really like room for us women to respect our cycles and to like, you know, even how we naturally, like with our hormones, our emotions and everything, evolve, it's seen as oftentimes a weakness or a problem or don't be so difficult, and it's just like we kind of think there's something wrong, but it's just because women are forcing themselves to live against what is actually like optimal, you know, because whether ladies you like it or not, our bodies are built to have a baby, whether we want babies or not, but it's like we can't expect to push ourselves this linear way, like all the time, bang, 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 100%, because our bodies are not made for that, right? So it's been a big lesson for me to learn to connect to the cyclicalities, is that even a word, to the cycle that we naturally go through each month, and to respect that as well. You know, like I have got to notice like I can get really good results and even better results without pushing myself like, okay, now you're on your period and you're feeling very tired and you're just like, no, you still have to go to the gym, you still have to push yourself, no matter how you feel, you have to push yourself. That was like the old approach. But eventually I realized that's not really optimal. It doesn't really feel good. It leads to a lot of hormonal issues with a lot of women. This like pushing ourselves too much.
I always ask myself how, not only, you know, definitely yes, athletes, how do they do it when they have their period? And a competition, because, well, I've never experienced how it is to, you know, have your period, but I've been in some relationships and I see what it's like, and the pain that you can have, or you just, you can't push that hard during that time. But also, like, for your, if you have a business or if you're just working somewhere, I think there should be, like, we should be talking more about it.
Absolutely.
Because you can't expect, I completely agree with you, and I think it will be triggering some people, but I completely agree with you. You can't expect from men who don't have those cycles that, women just perform like men do. I think the working world is built for men and not for women.
Absolutely.
So maybe you want to share, maybe not, but I would be interested, how do you navigate through it as a business owner? Do you say, like, oh, it's my period, I'm going to take days off? That's, by the way, always my thing that I tell my girlfriend, it's your period, don't worry. Lay down, do nothing.
Good.
I'm gonna take care.
Good.
I'm gonna take care of you. Yeah, maybe some business owners are listening right now. So
absolutely, that's a really good question and a very important question, because oftentimes there is this almost this fear for women, like, if I respect my period and I would have to rest, that means, like, I just take the painkillers and I push through, because that's been the expectation for so long. But I actually plan that a lot in my calendar already in advance, because I've noticed that and I've studied this a lot as well, in different parts of our cycle, not only like now I'm bleeding, now I'm not, but there's like different phases how our hormones go and what processes are happening in the body. And there's actually a superpower when we connect to that. It's not only like just those couple of days when you're in the ovulation phase, when you're like, it's at your best, basically, like your hormones are peaking and you're feeling like this is the perfect time to go, do podcasts and public speaking and launch and all the things. But there's also beauty in the other seasons, even on the period, when you're feeling more kind of tired and inward. But when you respect those different cycles, then you can actually benefit from it. Like, for example, my period, yes, I take it much slower, but there's a lot of like things coming up for me, like a lot of realizations, and there's a kind of almost this deeper connection to something within me that I don't have when I'm like out there, performing my best to the world. So that's kind of like that phase where when I connect to myself. And how I teach this to my clients is like the seasons. So the period is when you're in the winter season. So this is when you naturally are more tired, you want and you need to take more rest, you need to listen to the body. And by the way, for any ladies listening, we are not supposed to have any pain on our periods. So this is very normalized in our culture, because women are not living in tune with the cycle and respecting the cycle. This is why the body is holding up all the tension, and we get all these hormonal imbalances which show up as period pains and all the like problems, women losing their periods and being like all over the place with the cycle lengths. But our bodies are designed perfectly, so that should not be happening. So when you start to live in tune with the cycle, usually the period pains go away. That was my case. I went from like passing out of pain every month into having zero pain as well. And this is what the clients that I work with, even that we don't even do much in the nutrition or like those kind of spaces that oftentimes also can be really helpful, but just kind of connecting more to the balance and harmony, the energetics of the feminine and the masculine, and connecting to the kind of being a woman. They're getting their periods back, their cycles are evening out, the pains are dissolving. So it's really interesting. It's like much more depth to it that most women and also most men, as being, of course, like partners and brothers and friends, like know. So yeah, the winter is the kind of like going inward period, and then after the bleed is the spring. This is when the hormones start to rise again, and women start to have more energy and kind of coming back to life, and that curiosity comes in, and there's like more like going from the inward energy to the outward energy. This is a really good time to start like putting those ideas into action that you got on the winter season, like starting to like plan a new program if you're an entrepreneur, or like in whatever space you are, like kind of starting to make a plan and put down the goals like more specifically. And then comes the ovulation, which is a couple of days period. when you're fertile, and this is the summer. This is when most women love this season the most, because that's when you're like very much like confident and, you know, glowing, and you're like ready for everything. This is like the perfect time to, you know, do kind of like most challenging things, public speaking, whatever it is like that. You like want to put yourself out there. Crossfit competitions or any competitions, you know, when you want to like perform at your best, usually the ovulation season is best for that. And then after that comes the autumn, which is usually the longest. So that's between the ovulation period and before you start bleeding again. And this is when kind of like these are like very similar to how nature goes as well. So that's like little by little. Life. Yeah, and life. Little by little, you know, the leaves start to fall off. It starts to get more cold. You like start to want to go more inward and less social and reflect back and kind of like go into your little cocoon a little bit more. And also like here, I tend to journal much more, and like much more kind of like self-awareness comes up, and like completing those things before going into winter. So it's a really good season to complete any tasks and kind of like create that space when you start bleeding that you can just like take it more easy. But of course, there is like, people are different, women are different, but like that's a very kind of nice way to look at it, and can be really like practical and helpful to start at least paying a little bit more attention into how to take it into account.
The sponsor of today's episode is VivoLife. VivoLife has been the go-to place for me for more than 4 years when it comes to supplements. What makes VivoLife so special? Many things. First of all, they test every single product for heavy metals, pesticides, herbicides, PCBs. I'm really conscious about what I put into my body, and many supplements, unfortunately, have things that you aren't even aware of, like heavy metals. So whenever you consume supplements, make sure they are third-party tested. VivoLife has their own vegan factory. They plant 1 tree for every single order, and just make sure that we get high quality supplements. My go-to supplements that I use almost every single day are the Vegan Multi. Covers all potential critical nutrients on a vegan diet like vitamin D, vitamin B12, iodine, omega-3. Really important that it's tested for heavy metals, brain and heart health, creatine, especially if you are an athlete like I am. If you are already a VivoLife customer, make sure to order via my link to support the channel. What you just talked about reminded me of life in general. You know, I always say life is like the seasons, and usually wintertime feels like it's gonna be forever like this. It's gonna be forever like bad whenever we have a tough time. We can't really see the light. And summer feels also like, oh, it's gonna be forever like this. You know, then we get confused when there are challenging times again. And I think we need this contrast. We wouldn't know what good times would feel like if we wouldn't have bad times. We wouldn't know what it's, you know, without bad emotions, there wouldn't be good emotions. You wouldn't. So this contrast is usually, I try to look at it as part of life and not fight it. Because usually when you don't accept it, whatever happened, that's the toughest.
Absolutely.
That question, like, why did this happen to me, can make you go absolutely crazy.
I love that. I love that so much, because I think that's the key to how we do life. Is like, are you holding on to the resistance, trying to control everything and getting upset all the time because you can't control like 95% of what's, you know, happening, and then fighting what's happening. Like even what you mentioned about emotions, that's been like a big part in my journey, going from like always having to be strong, show no weakness, and always, you know, holding that image, into like actually learning to feel emotion instead of always just going to the gym and numbing and avoiding, into actually finding the beauty of the winter and the dark times, what you said as well, like actually like seeing that we need the contrast, we need that polarity to really have the full spectrum in the other side as well with the light. If we're not willing to go into the darkness, we also like limit how far we can feel all the, you know, the joy and the love and all the good stuff, because we are kind of keeping ourselves small and safe, because we don't trust that we can handle those kind of intense, difficult emotions.
I like that. And that's one of the best things I ever developed, trusting that I'm able to find a solution for this. There is so far, maybe this will change, there hasn't been a single problem in my life that just forced me to stop and never do anything again. You know, there was always something. There was always a solution. There's always a sunrise tomorrow, a sunset tomorrow, you know, even though sometimes it can feel like, I'm not going to find a way out of this. You know, I remember, I'm pretty young, I would say, but still, there were multiple times in my life when I felt like, hey, will this pain ever go away? Especially breakups, relationships. You know, if it's like, this is going to be, it will suck forever.
Absolutely, yeah. And that's usually where the resistance comes in, right? Like, because you don't want to feel that intense pain, and you're like, I don't want this, and then it makes it even worse when we are like resisting what is. But when we allow and surrender to the process and actually allow ourselves to feel the emotions, as like, we don't even need to necessarily fix anything. Like, often there's this idea like, okay, I'm feeling like this is wrong, because in the society it's labeled like anger is not okay, you shouldn't be crying, whatever it is, you know, like there's a big list of emotions that are kind of like shameful, or you shouldn't be feeling those. Yeah. So that's how we're, you know, programmed. And then when we feel those emotions, we're like, oh, I better like get rid of this as fast as possible. So everyone has their own mechanisms, like binge eating, going to the gym, just like getting busy with work, drugs, whatever it is. But then it's like always pressed down, and there's like the resistance and the kind of distraction of it. But then when we learn to allow it to come, and as you said, there's always a new sunrise and always a new sunset, oftentimes instead of, I need to sort this now, there's of course many things that we do need to do something about, but oftentimes when the intense emotions come, the only thing we need to do is to feel, is to create that safe space for ourselves to actually cry and scream into pillows, whatever it is, to allow ourselves to feel it. And then we feel free after. Yeah. Right? And then the next day, without doing anything else, you're like, oh, how did I make it such a big deal? I feel good now, you know? Yeah. Or maybe the next day is a breakup, but after weeks or certain amount of time that you needed to process those emotions, eventually you will rise. Yeah. Right? But it's like, if we try to fix everything in the mind, in the head, and we don't go into the body, where is the subconscious, where the emotions are stored, there's a discord. And that's where I believe we can't live life fully that way. If we're always here, we like are not fully like, you know, exploring and sensing everything, because we are trying to protect something that we don't want to feel. So yeah.
1,000,000%. I don't know if you've ever tried dynamic meditation. It is a really interesting practice. It actually has nothing to do with the classic meditation of just sitting and, you know, like focusing on a mantra or something. It's called dynamic. You're screaming, you are punching into pillows. It has like different phases, and it just reminded me of that, because this is such a healing experience for me, because I was conditioned to never be angry. I hated when like people around me were angry as a child. Like, it always made me feel scared. Never show emotions, like never cry, never do anything of this, because this is weakness. And when you do this dynamic meditation, you do all of this, and it's such a beautiful thing to just scream or to just punch a pillow, and no one is judging you like, oh, what is wrong with this person or something. No, it's like, maybe there is a reason why we can cry. Maybe there is a reason why we have the ability to scream. And it is so freeing, but still in society it's like, oh, what's going on there? Why is someone screaming there? Right. And it's a different kind of screaming. You know, when you scream at someone, like blaming this person, that's not what you were referring to. I think you were more like getting it out, whatever needs to be said, and not like against someone, but just with yourself, or in a safe space.
Yeah, exactly. That's the key, right? It's a healthy way. Yeah. Because I believe that the reason why we have so much violence and so much like conflict in the world is because we are not taught how to deal with the emotions, right? If we just hold the steam in for decades, eventually there's going to be outlets that it has to explode. And that's when people like exploded in the wrong places, right? So like I didn't never do it in like a group, but this is my daily practice. If not daily, at least weekly. You can ask my partner Ricky. He's like, oh, the witch stuff is going on now. I go upstairs, I set up my space, I go into the emotions. So I know it's very, very liberating. This is also what I teach my clients, because especially for women, we are like conditioned to be these, the good girls, and for women it's more acceptable the crying. So usually women are quite okay with like processing sadness, at least in a corner by themselves. But like the emotions of anger and rage and like, those kind of emotions, especially for women, are kind of like, oh my God, like what's wrong with you? So learning to tap into that is gonna like bring the layers, like, unleash so much more potential in you, because you accept all the parts in yourself. Like the sides that you thought, oh, this is something bad, I shouldn't look at it, I should just, it's kind of like I did a Vipassana, which is like 100 hours of meditation in 10 days. And there they were like talking about how our mind is going crazy, how it's kind of like this wild animal. And if we have the wild animal in us, we either try to like pretend it's not there, or it's like going crazy, or we can learn to train the wild animal, like the lion or whatever. So then we have that potential, the strength, everything from that wild animal, but we are in control, right? So we don't need to like try to like, oh my God, the wild animal is coming up. Oh my God, I need to numb myself, run somewhere, do something. Or like it's going all over the place and you're like racing for everyone and like exploding in the grocery store, but you're in charge. So this is, I believe, when we learn to process emotions in a healthy way and we connect to ourselves deeper, that's when we train the wild animal within us.
Yeah, took me 20 years to find that out, that like, especially for a man, as a man, that it's okay to, it's actually a good thing, it's a helpful tool, like good that our bodies are able to, cry and process things. And I wish more men would feel the beauty of just,
and I love
crying
that,
and not.
Yeah, I loved what you just said. We wouldn't have the emotions or something in the lines of why would we have these emotions if we were not supposed to feel them?
Yeah, like why would a man be able to cry
exactly.
if you couldn't,
Yeah, why would we have anger? Why would we have like sadness if it would be like, okay, these emotions bad, like, okay, like why would we have them, right? We're supposed to have all those come up.
So maybe let's continue there with the Vipassana. It was 10 days of silence, I think silent meditation, right? Because I'm thinking of doing it, so selfish question at this point. Would you recommend doing it?
Yes, I actually was thinking a lot about that question whilst I was there, because it was one of the hardest things I did, for sure. But it was very profoundly transformed the way I see life. So whilst I was there, I was like, because I had one commitment for myself: no matter what happens, I will not quit. Like, even if the world blows up, I will stay for the 10 days. So for me, because a few people quit, and when someone quits and you saw them walk out, and you think, oh, now they go back to the jungle life, have the good food and go to parties. And you're just sitting there, and one day feels like 1 week, and you're just like, why am I doing this again? But yeah, I had that commitment to myself, and I was thinking a lot about the question, like, of my friends, who would be like tough enough to do this, because you're trying to entertain yourself, like, with all the meditation. And I came to the conclusion, I don't think a lot of people would want to do it, but I believe it's like an ice bath. It's very painful to go in, it's uncomfortable, you don't really many people don't really want to go in the ice bath because it's cold, I don't like it. But then when you go in and when you come out, you feel freaking, on top of the world. And it's kind of like a deep dive, 10 days. I know there's shorter
10 days
ones.
ice bath?
10 days ice bath, maybe so some next challenge. The 10 days meditation, I know there's shorter ones, but I saw it also with this ice bath example, actually. I don't think you need to first go into 20 degrees and then into 18 degrees and then into 16 degrees. I think you can just go straight to the deep end, straight to the, coldest one, and you're going to handle it, and you're going to learn how to, surrender into that. So I believe everyone can do it, as of you literally just need to sit and meditate. But then the reality also that most people can't even go to the toilet without their phone, you know, having that moment just with themselves. That made me also think of like, I don't know how, because I've been, you know,
it's actually a good point, but
right. So yeah, I would recommend it. I would definitely recommend it. I think it will bring for everyone. It will bring your like deep stuff up, because it's like how they explain it there on the first night as well. It's like a clinical surgery for your mind. So they open your brain, or you open your brain, and you start removing the pus. You know, and you sit there for 10 days and it's freaking painful and you're moving the pus and your wild animal is going crazy. But eventually it will get more quiet because, you know, the things leave. And that's where you find that connection. That's where you find that peace. So they also said that's what's really important, that you don't quit, because otherwise you leave you're like on the surgery table and you leave the wound open and then you go in the middle of it. So I could see that process happening on the like final days when it came together, and we were like, you know, putting the wound back and then putting the lotion back, how they said, like the healing lotion, and then you left just so much lighter. So it's definitely a challenge, but it's like an ice bath, like anyone can jump in, I believe.
Maybe I'm gonna do it. For me, the time without my phone wouldn't be that difficult, because I have every week, I have at least like one day where I'm turning it completely off. But the sleep part and everything, I think this would be the most challenging part for me. But I don't know, I've never done it, so.
Yeah, it's like, because you also don't have books, you can't write, you have like just a little room, you can't have eye contact, so it's like very intense.
Oh, yeah.
It's really like, there is no escape. Even the space where I did it was very small, so you can't go for walks, you're not allowed to leave the space. So it's literally like, you sit with your shit for 10 days. See you on the other side.
Lovely, lovely. I have a couple of final questions for you. The first one would be, it's one of my new most favorite questions that I like to ask my guests. What would your 5 years younger self tell you? Like, what kind of advice would your 5 years younger self give you right now?
So my 5-year younger self to me right now?
Yeah, not to you.
Okay, interesting.
That's what everyone says, because usually it's like the other way around, you know, connect to your higher self. But I think there is beauty in connecting to the younger self.
She would definitely, what we also talked about earlier, she would say like, have more fun. Don't take it so seriously. You're going to make it anyway. And she would tell me to believe in myself. Yeah,
that's beautiful. The first part, so far, 100% of like every single guest said the same thing. Have more fun.
Wow.
Enjoy. Like, why stressing about it? Why not just having fun? And I think the final question would be, if you could give advice right now with what you know to your 5 years younger self, like the other way around, what would that be?
What would I tell the younger self? I would tell her that...
Buy some Bitcoin.
Yeah. I would tell her that you're already worthy and enough. You don't need to prove yourself to anyone. You don't need to push yourself so hard. It's okay to not be perfect. And enjoy the journey.
That's beautiful. Tui, it's been a pleasure. I could keep talking to you for the next 3 hours, but we have a sunset to catch. So thank you for listening. If this episode brought you value, share it with a friend, share it with a family member on social media. You can tag Tui, you can tag me. And Tui, I'm excited to see what the future brings for you. Thank you so much for being here. And until next time.
Until next time, thank you for having me.